and then
Okay.
from there.
All right.
Hi, y'all. My name is Meebs, and I'm the parliamentarian here at Austin Young Democrats. I'm here with Jeff Travillion for an interview before we do our county judge endorsements. Jeff, do you want to tell us a little bit about yourself and why you're running for county judge?
Well, I moved here to go to the LBJ School of Public Affairs to study public administration. I have worked in state and local government for the last 34 years, 14 years with the state, 16 years with the city. And when I won the office, I retired from the city, and I've been working 3.5 years here. I'm interested in running for the county judge's office because I've been intimately involved in government, intentionally involved in government for more than 30 years. I think that I have learned a lot about it. I have worked on a number of issues, some of them social justice issues, the founding of the police monitor system. When I was NAACP president, we sued the school district to make sure that they were providing remedial assistance for those kids who failed the TOS exam, for example. We sued the district so that they set up the after-school remediation programs. Um, I have been involved with at every level of government, from an intern when I worked for Gary Morrow's office, an intern as I worked at the legislature, mid-level manager. Actually, I was director of a program at the city of Austin. When I worked for John Sharp at the comptroller's office, I was involved at the Texas Performance Review. So I think that I have a unique cluster of skills that will serve the community well during a time of pandemic, disorder, and all of the things that we're experiencing through the Black Lives Matter movement as well.
Thank you. That's a very extensive background. That's great work.
Thank you.
And so our first question is about incarceration. So Travis County has taken a number of steps to promote diversion from incarceration. How effective do you think those efforts have been, and do you support these efforts at diversion?
I absolutely support the efforts. I think that that we have been successful. I think that we would even be considered in a leadership role in a lot of communities. However, we have got to work through the entire continuum of issues. And what I mean by that is we've done well putting a sobering center in place. It's a good assessment tool, but there needs to be more of a detox tool. We have a shameful number of drug beds that are available for people who have insurance and desperately want them. We've also got to do a better job of creating programs and sponsoring programs that give you the stability of 12 steps programs, a structured environment with professional counselors and someone who can really keep you on the road to recovery. However, the other thing that we do a less good job at is making sure that we do the training of people while they're on the inside to make sure that when they leave, they can find jobs and not fall back into recidivism. We sponsored, my office sponsored a pilot project that put $100,000 up to train people who were leaving jail and going out into the world. We trained them in a couple of areas. We actually had some work with our facilities management team, actually had jobs that they prepared for before they left jail. We also paid $86,000 to get 24 individuals trained to get their commercial driver's licenses. Now, the first class, we partnered with CTRMA, who identifies and needs commercial drivers all the time. Their vendors do. They're prime contractors. We contracted with ACC to do the training, and they were allowed to do the practice at Capital Right, which is a private sector firm. Our first class graduated. We had 14 people who graduated, and no job offer was lower than $25 an hour for each of the people who graduated. And we think that that gives you the ability to then go back into the community and get affordable housing. and do the things that are that define stability. But it's really important for us to recognize that we have to look at the whole continuum. Even after training, we've got to think about housing. We have a woefully inadequate system to address the housing needs of formerly incarcerated citizens or formerly incarcerated community members. We've got to handle assessment through housing.
Well, thank you. A follow-up question to that would be about mental health issues. And we know that about 10% of all 911 calls are related to mental health crises. And it shows that there's a huge need that is unmet. What resources does the county provide for citizens struggling with mental health, and how can we improve the way we deal with these people?
Well, so we've really got to start from the predicate that when the state closed down the Texas state school system, that was our primary mental health entity that was funded by the state. When that was taken away, people were taken out of the state school and pushed into the streets. We have never really done a comprehensive assessment of exactly what that has meant to our communities. And the county, has three primary constitutional functions: jails, courts, and indigent care. We have to do what happens. One of the reasons that we have so many people in jail with mental health conditions is somebody at the end of the day, a mental health call can lead to a jail call.
Right.
So it's important for us to make sure that we define what our issues are. Now, what we have done through our justice planning department is we have looked at all of our programs. We have identified every single program. We've identified what the goal of the program is, how it is funded, who is involved in it, who keeps the data from it, to identify opportunities to align these programs. So we have done the first step, and our office actually initiated that investigation. What is it that we've got in place? What kind of outcomes is it rendering? Should we be standing up this program? Or if this is an ineffective program, can we move the resources to another program that might be more helpful? We spend almost $7 million a year with Integral Care to address mental health needs. We work with Integral Care in local school districts as well. Pflugerville Independent School District, Manor Independent School District, Del Valle Independent School District. We know that we want to have continuity, but it's important first to put an asset map together of all of the things that we have in the field, whether they are working well, to stand up those programs that are doing well and to eliminate those programs that aren't doing well. But the other thing that we've really got to be pushing for is the $10 billion that we should be receiving of Texas tax dollars back from the federal government to stand up our Medicaid system so that we can serve more people and also build our systems better to document the type of care that's necessary and the type of care that some people are getting, so that we can make sure that there's continuity over time. So we make a significant investment. That investment is not enough, but we are looking into all of the programs that we run to make sure that they're running as effectively as they possibly can.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really important to tackle incarceration with the multifaceted issues that are all related. Just out of curiosity, like if I was to call 911 right now, would they direct me to Integral Care, or would they send over for a mental health issue? Like if I was having a mental health crisis, would I be directed to Integral Care, or would it be?
So I mean, the question would be whether you or whomever was calling on your behalf knew the types of programs that they could ask for.
Okay.
Okay, so I think that it's going to be important, equally important, to teach people how to use the system, to teach people which programs are actually out there. That's why we put the asset map together. But we've got to do a better job of communicating to everyone, because oftentimes, if you don't know where to call and what to ask for, you might be routed to a place that won't address what you need effectively. And
Exactly.
oftentimes you have parents that call for adult children. You have for children of theirs who happen to be over 18. There's a complicated system of who can commit and who can't commit and under what circumstances, because most people, even if their child is being physical, they want their mental health issue addressed, not to send them to jail. So the question becomes, how do we make it easier to
Mhm.
really get you to the systems and the services that you need? Because and I think this is really a significant issue in Black and brown communities and in low income communities, because we have seen so many times parents call just to get someone to come out and calm things down,
Mm.
and then things get out of hand, and sometimes people lose their lives, and we don't want that.
Right. Yeah, I think that's the conversation we were having when we were writing this question about mental health. It's why would why are we having unskilled professionals dealing with mental health issues when we have integral care, when we have resources that we can use rather than sending unskilled uh, people who are not trained with mental health.
But this is a significant issue.
Mm.
And we have really got to get to a point where we are providing true employment opportunities for people who are engaged in social work, for people who are engaged with vulnerable populations that have mental health issues. Because, since 1972, we've got a number of sober houses around the city. People will use a former residence for a sober house. And the assumption is that they're getting medicinal and therapeutic care and all of the things that they need in these houses. But they're virtually unregulated, and almost all of them are in low income communities. So if you have somebody that has mental health issues and is not taking their medicine, and is not getting counseling. We had at least 2 deaths in my last job at Austin Code Compliance, where what happened was the person was in a sober house, wasn't being properly monitored, got up at 3 o'clock in the morning, beat on somebody's door, scared them, and that person ended up shooting them.
Mm-hmm.
And the issue was, have we done the proper diagnosis?
Mm-hmm.
Do we have supervision where it's necessary? Are we sure that people have access to the medicine that they need? And when we don't do those things, oftentimes we can put our community in jeopardy, and we need to make sure that our grandparents and our parents and our children are not subjected to community members who really need help. We don't need to jail them. We don't need to look down on them. We need to make sure that they get the services that they need.
Yes, for sure. Speaking of the jails, Travis County is moving forward with a $79 million women's jail, um, despite data showing that there's a decline in jail bookings because of pretrial diversion programs.
Yes.
What is the status of the jail project, and do you support the funding of the new women's jail?
Okay. I'm glad you asked me that question, because this is a question that has kind of been handled in a simplistic manner. And I think if people knew more about what was going on with our jail system, they would feel differently about this. And what I mean by that is, we have got 7 buildings on that site that were designed to be used for 25 years, and now some are over 30 years old. One is over 40 years old.
Right.
So when you think about what it takes to maintain a facility, we've got the law of diminishing marginal returns. It's a building that can never be brought up to code. It's a building that's not really safe anymore. It's a building that doesn't have up-to-date clinical resources, yet we keep patching and patching and patching and patching. So most of us would argue that We don't need to replace all 7 of those facilities.
Mhm.
But what we really do need to do is put a couple state-of-the-art facilities in place. Now, the buildings that have been constructed 40 years ago were warehouse construction type buildings. They were designed almost like dormitories with bars. You put people in there, and there's very little interaction. There's very little room for movement around. No counseling offered. We had the women's prison designed specifically to have a modern footprint, to be built in pods instead of warehouses, to make sure that we can have access to mental health facilities there, to make sure that we could have access to training there so that we could train people before they go out into the workforce, to make sure that the clinic was state of the art. If the clinic is state of the art and you can get your clinical needs and your major needs like surgeries there as well, what we do know is we've learned a whole lot more about medicine and how we provide services in the last 25 years than we possibly could have known when we built those buildings earlier. So we want to have one state-of-the-art building that will allow us to pull women out of 4 different buildings and be in a pod by themselves. We think it's safer for women. We think it's safer for those people who protect them. We think that it will provide better access to clinical and health care. We think that it just makes sense.
Okay.
And we also put purple pipe into the design so that we will have second uses of our water to cool our air conditioning system. So we thought about all types of technology from the mental health standpoint, but also from the way that we use our natural resources as well. I don't think that we need to replace all of our buildings, but we do need to replace our women's facility and make it a solid facility that women can truly be served. We want to treat them in a humane way and not wait for a lawsuit to tell us that we've got to do it within a certain period of time at an exquisite cost that would certainly be more than the cost we've associated with this one.
Thank you. So just to clarify, you believe in funding, you support it, and because it's going to be more ethical, they're going to have better facilities and
yes. And the reason that we held up on it was when the design was brought back to us, it did not have the state-of-the-art comprehensive medical facility. So Commissioner Shea and myself pulled it and said, if this isn't going to do everything that we asked for it to do from a health standpoint and from a design standpoint, then we do not want to make this investment. And that's why it was held up.
Awesome. And when I asked different candidates about the same questions, they also brought up possibly supporting the new jail if it included something that still decreased, because we know that jail bookings have decreased because of pretrial diversion programs. So they preferred a new jail if it made sure that we weren't booking more people just to fill up beds, or it had like a capacity limit on making sure that we are not increasing the efforts of mass incarceration.
We absolutely do not support mass incarceration. I am an African-American man who grew up in the South. I've had a gun placed to my head for rolling a yellow light because I was driving a car that the officer didn't think I could afford to drive. I understand the implications and the difficulties. Our goal is to serve and treat people humanely while they are incarcerated and hopefully give them the skills that are necessary so they won't have to come back.
Awesome. Well, thank you for that. So just related to that, what is harm reduction and how can it be implemented in Travis County? I feel like you've already expanded quite a lot on harm reduction efforts.
Well, I mean, we've got to make sure that we handle safety first. We've got to make sure that we do a good job of assessing first. Oftentimes, historically, a cookie cutter approach has been taken. You do things exactly one way. It's important for us to understand what the issues are of the human being that we are addressing. It's important that we understand their issues and we get them to the right resources. That we make sure that if we don't have the right resources at hand, if there are programs that are addressing the needs of people that are being successful, we need to make sure that we're studying them and bringing them into this environment. We want to make sure that that we understand that there are programs out there that can serve people as alternatives for drugs, for example. But we want to make sure also that if there are needles around, we want to make sure that we discard of them properly, and that we put resources in place so that we know it can be done in a safe and effective manner. We have learned so much from New York. We have learned so much from San Francisco. We are a major town now. We're a big city, and we're growing exponentially. It's important that we take those tools. It's important that we study them, and that we build the best quality of life that we can. But not only do we build we build a better quality of life by assessing well, providing the tools that people want and need, and making sure that we make their interactions with government as positive and effective as we possibly can.
Mhm. Awesome. And just to follow up on that, what is restorative justice and how can it be implemented in Travis County?
Well, restorative justice is a principle that the NAACP, and I was a president of the NAACP for 7 years here, and have served on the state executive committee for more than 20 years. Restorative justice is another idea about assessing properly, not going in with maximum force, but going in to seek and have an understanding of what it is we're addressing and how we can address it effectively, whether that is from the standpoint of the victim or the victimizer. I'll give you an example. We had, when I was at the NAACP, we had a fourth grader. This kid was a straight A student. In December, went home, came back in January, and the student was incorrigible. Was angry, didn't want to talk to anybody, fussy, wanted to sit in the corner. Within 6 weeks, they were about to put him in special ed, take him out of regular classes, put him in special ed. We had a person, her name was Dr. Jean Spencer. She had been a principal before, but she was the person that was the last one to determine whether you would go to special ed or not. Talked to this kid and found out that over Christmas holidays, he found that his mother had terminal cancer, and he didn't know how to deal with it. So he acted out, but he acted out because it was a mental health issue that nobody knew, nobody asked about, nobody knew how to deal with. Restorative justice means understanding the issue before you and the component parts, and making sure that we conduct business in such a way that we truly create healing. We truly create the opportunity for us to find out what caused this problem and deal with the core issue. And when you put counseling around this child, when you put people around this child, when you let this child know that this is a difficult thing, but you can overcome, then he becomes a part of the community, and he looks to the community to address his issues. And we've got to do a better job of understanding where the violence comes from and how it can be redirected and how we can reclaim people instead of incarcerating them and destroying people. It's the whole idea of, if we know somebody has a problem and they know that they have a problem, but there's a journey that they've got to go through, how can we help them get on that journey and let them know that there is the other side of it, and we can help you get there?
Yes, I definitely agree. We definitely need community-based solutions to a lot of these problems. And speaking of communities, we have a lack of accessibility to legislative bodies, especially communities of color have lack of representation in a lot of areas. How do you plan on making the commissioner's court more accessible to working class? Currently, commissioner court meetings are on business hours on Tuesday, and that excludes a lot of working folks.
I understand. And when I was an intern, and when I was in some of my first jobs,
Mhm.
especially at the legislature, my issue might come up for hearing at 2 a.m.
Mhm.
and I was there to present on it, or I wasn't there to present on
Right.
it. It is important that we make people know that there are a number of ways to interact with us.
Mhm.
When you look at just at precinct one thing that I do is I meet regularly with ISD staff, with independent school district staff. I meet regularly with city staff, whether that is Pflugerville, Manor, or Elgin. I make sure that when we are trying to find, as we're developing our budgets and we are looking for where we will be investing on health and safety, that we try to align our projects where we can. One example is we've worked with Pflugerville ISD and also the city of Pflugerville to try to straighten up streets that are routes to schools, for example, or evacuation routes if in fact we are living in an area with low water crossings and not a lot of good highway around. We want to make sure when you look at our last bond issue, it was to address low water crossings, safe routes to school, evacuation routes, and second ways out of communities that only had one way in and one way out.
Mhm.
So we invite people from our various communities to participate on that bond process. When we're trying to find out whether there's an action that we should take, we now have our staff reach out to neighborhood associations, reach out to churches, for example, reach out to PTAs in schools, so that we go to meetings that are already being held in the community and ask to be on the agenda rather than ask them to come to our meeting at a
Mhm.
time when they can't be there. But we also like to make sure that people know that they can call in their questions. They can write in their questions. They can also call us in our office, and we will always make time to sit and meet with community members who are trying to do constructive things in their community. It's important that everyone knows that we are here to serve the public first,
Mhm.
and that I'm on a number of Zoom calls now, so that I tell people what's going to be on the agenda, how they can participate, where information is that they're looking for. Other groups that are involved in their area. We try to look at areas by zip code area, for example, or by school district area, so that we look at resources and we don't have people compete. Oftentimes, we'll put an RFP out and we'll say, well, either you or you. When in essence, we don't need one or the other. We need all of them collaborating together because we've got significant gaps. We have tried to look at problems, address them, and make sure that we build sustainability into the process and not have one group compete against the other.
Mhm. Well, thank you for that. And we're talking about the Austin's economic development deals, and
Yes.
Amazon didn't choose to move to Austin because the city refused to incentivize the move, although Apple moved into the location they were considering in Williamson County when they incentivized their move. So Tesla was recently really deeply incentivized by Travis County. And do you think that Travis County should pursue economic deals? And is the process to assess these deals adequate?
Okay. Um, I don't think that any process gives you everything that you want.
Mhm.
So if it's a question of adequacy, I think that Travis County got a good deal that will benefit the county. If it is a question of whether it is a perfect deal that got everything that we wanted, certainly the answer is no. However, what the Tesla deal, so I do support I do support economic development deals, but I support them with certain nuances.
Right.
And Tesla's an example of a nuanced approach. Now, when we talk about whether it was deeply invested in, we would argue that it is deeply invested in by the school district because the school district is 60% of your tax bill. And I understand that the state is providing some reimbursements to the school district so that it won't suffer. What we did was we took a piece of property that was getting us $64,000 every 10 years. And even after all of the incentives are paid over the next 10 years, that property will bring us $8 million instead of $64,000. Now, what we did was we made a deal that said it is a reimbursement contract. We have laid out the performance measures, and we think that there's solid performance measures that enhance the community. And we said, you give us the metrics, and if we find, okay, so FY21 is when they'll begin to operate. When you if you can define that you have met our metrics, then we will reimburse you your tax bill in FY22 for the actions taken in FY21. And what that is ultimately going to amount to is about $1.5 million a year. So we think that, so if you're looking at a deal that is $15 to $17 million over 10 years, but what you generate is the land was a brownfield. So they're going to clean up the brownfield and put a state-of-the-art manufacturing property on it. It will rebuild our supply chain, particularly in the area of auto manufacturing, and be the most modern manufacturing plant on earth, right here in Travis County. It was positioned between 78724 Colony Park and 78725 Austin's Colonies, which have our highest healthcare disparities in the region. So you put $2.5 billion of investment in an area that has not been invested in the last 50 years. And so you bring investment, you bring 5,000 new jobs. More than half of those jobs will be available for semi-skilled workers, meaning you don't have to have a college degree to get it. And you're talking about partnerships with Del Valle, Manor, Pflugerville, Austin. Hopefully we'll see 50% of those jobs go to Travis County people. It was a huge investment, and it will bring, and we think that investment will bring the grocery store that we've been looking for, places to sit down and eat, places to shop, public transportation. All of those things don't happen without investment. And we think that it's going to make that region of the county grow in a substantial and productive way.
And what more do you think can be done to make sure that these deals are equitable, increase equity in Travis County, to make sure that the communities there get all of these benefits are not pushed out from their communities?
I think that we have to use our anti-displacement dollars well. I think that we have to begin to look at our public properties that are owned by our school district, that are owned by our city, that are owned by our county, and we should probably put them in land trusts so that we can arrest the cost we can arrest the value of the property at today's prices. If we do that, then and we put structures on that, we can build the deeds in such a way that since it is a land trust, I mean the government owns the land, so the value of the land doesn't fluctuate. You put a house on it. If it's $100,000 house, and you live in it for 5 years, and it becomes $125,000 house, you sell your interest in the house. The value of the property remains the same.
Mm,
So that ensures affordability for generations to come
mhm,
because you're selling the interest in the structure, not the interest in the value of the property. We think that those types of tools are going to be necessary to maintain affordability. We're also going to have to make sure that we protect the interests of our residents who are 65 and older. We've
mhm.
got to make sure that we don't allow property values to go up at such a rate that it renders their own properties unaffordable for them.
Awesome. And tied in with economic development deals is the housing crisis that we have in Austin. So
Mhm.
Travis County has a wealth of natural beauty that is threatened by greenfield development.
Mhm.
So last year, Travis County courts were used to stop the city of Austin from increasing residential density, which put a greater pressure on Travis County outside of Austin to house people outside of the city limits. How can Travis County respond to the lack of affordable housing in Austin and push for a regional response for the housing need?
That's a very good question. And we did a couple of things to help in that area. You know, we have a housing corporation, and we also have a Travis County Housing Authority. Actually, we've got 8 corporations and a housing authority. What we have tried to do is make sure that we invest in affordable housing and that we build public-private partnerships with those who would build affordable housing in our area. And I'll give you one example: the Beckett on 969, right at Austin's Colony, in 24 units. But we got a number of those units to be made deeply affordable. And when I say that, I mean 30% of area median income. Now, what that means is if you drive a bus or if you work in the cafeteria, you can afford to live there because it's around $500 a month. Okay, so one thing we did is we tried to make sure that we get deeply affordable investment. But we also asked them to put tutorial centers in their areas. We also asked them to work with Cap Metro. When Cap Metro comes closer in that direction, they will build a bus stop for Cap Metro. We asked them to work directly with the schools in the area to build relationships with the principals and counselors and teachers to augment what's going to happen in their after school programs. We want to make sure that also the transit access to schools, when we talk about safe routes to schools, are there sidewalks there? You know, do kids have to cross a major crossing to get there? We're trying to make sure that as we put the facilities together, we think about after school care, we think about safe routes to school, we think about public transit, we think about how seniors get to the grocery store, all before we start building. And we have been committed. We put, I think, we've put about 11 affordable housing properties in Precinct 1 over the last 4 or 5 years. And first of all, if you didn't know that they were affordable housing properties, you couldn't look at them and tell that they weren't market rate. Second thing is when you look at a fair housing assessment, they'll say, well, look, this is a food desert. This doesn't have good public transportation. It is a low opportunity area. So we've had them recommend against us putting putting affordable housing there. I think that is a flawed test because what we see is when you look at Decker Lake or Decker Lane, for example, you've got a number of places, and we actually approved a complex to go there against our fair housing assessment because we know if we don't plant that affordable property there now, when it becomes a high opportunity area, we won't be able to afford property. Now we know that Colony Park right there near Decker Lane is going through a renaissance right now. So they told us, well, you've got 56% of the properties in this zip code area as affordable. But we know that when Colony Park is built out, that number is going to go from 56 to 24. And if we hadn't put that 24% of affordable housing in there, there would be no affordable housing there. So we've got to be smart about the way that we use our dollars. We've got to make sure that we're talking to our public-private partners. We've got to make sure that we have long periods, that this will be affordable, that it will not go to market rate in 10 years. Those properties don't serve this community. Those that go for 99 years or in perpetuity will. We've got to make sure that that we have low income, that we have middle income, and we have high income living together, because that is the only way that you have constructive schools. When you have when you have very rich communities, they have great schools. When you have very poor communities, if you don't invest in them, they become poor schools. So we've got to have a mixed mixed group of homeowners in each of those communities in order to maintain the quality of life that we want to see for everyone.
Definitely agree. And the last question that we have for you is about climate change, which is an existential issue for everyone on Earth, regardless of whether you believe in it or not.
Yes.
And as county judge, can you speak on what you will do to mitigate this crisis, specifically relating to reduction in emissions and land conservation and emergency plans?
Well, first of all, we have come up with a climate action plan. We're one of the few counties that has done that. I've worked with Commissioner Shea. We have actually worked together since the SOS days. When I was NAACP president, we were the first African American organization to endorse SOS. And the whole idea was, and kind of the part of the idea came into fruition with Tesla. Why would you build over your water table when you have many other areas that you can build in that need investment? So we want to make sure that we're investing in the right parts, that we are not doing things that are not environmentally sensitive. We have supported the development of our BCCP. We have put a significant amount of property in through straight out purchases and through conservation easements that will guarantee that the property of the BCCP will never be built on. We have also done a good job, I think, of building a parks system from Pflugerville back over to Manor, all the way back to Austin. A lot of areas through conservation easements we've made sure will never be built on as well. So I think it's important that we continue our park building and BCCP building process. We have also paid close attention to the types of materials that we buy. We have made sure that we've put an internal team together to make sure that we are purchasing recycled goods, and that we are involved in the discussion about how these things are done. We have also, for example, this year, I was involved in, actually my office led, the waste siting ordinance. If you look at 290, if you look at East Austin, you see an inordinate number of landfills. Most of the landfills were put where the poor people lived and where people of color lived. That landfill should have been closed down in earnest in 2015, but it has grown up instead of out. And we put a siting ordinance in place so that it will not continue to grow. We actually want to push towards making it a Superfund site so that we can remove the industrial waste that sits over underground springs, so that it will not adversely impact the groundwater in the entire region. It's important that the 3M waste, which is still in barrels and which is not stored properly, be extracted and stored and remediated properly. We also have put forward a plan to allow up to 75% of our working population to work from home. What we noticed, and I serve on CapCog, they gave us a snapshot of the different elements in our air in February, and then a different snapshot of what it looked like in July. And there were very pronounced deductions, and that can be that is directly related to the fact that cars weren't on the road. So we know that if we move to teleworking, we have found that our productivity has not decreased, it has increased. We have found that it has, in a lot of ways, cleaned our air. We need to make sure that we remain a non-attainment city because there are many fines and other difficult issues that we have to that we have to deal with if we don't maintain our non-attainment status. So we've got to make sure that we preserve our property. We've got to make sure that we do things to lessen the amount of pollution put into the air. We've got to make sure that the landfills that we saw 50 to 75 years ago are remediated properly. And we've got to make sure that we all work together as a community to get that done.
Awesome. Thank you so much for your time. That's all the questions I had for you, Jeff. Thank you for interviewing with the Austin Young Democrats in our endorsement process for county judge. And I hope you have a wonderful evening.
Well, I really appreciate it. When I was NAACP president, I was the youngest one in the Austin branch. So I've been involved in this for a long time. And I think through internships and through opportunities, we can work together and make a lot of things happen and really build on this next generation of really great leadership. So I look forward to working with you in the future.
Thank you.